Can everyone hear me?
Yeah. Thank you very much. So I'd like to welcome the second speaker of the Opposition and Protein Canada.
In this debate, side proposition could not just snap their fingers and say that in our world we would have treated soldiers just like doctors or anybody else that we would have respected. Side proposition in their second speech failed to engage with the critical counterfactual that we give to in this debate, which is highly important in this round. Two questions I want to address refutation through. First, what is the effect of this policy on soldiers? And second, what is the effect of this on society and war? Let's discuss soldiers first. The claim that we get of proposition on this is that this is a significantly coercive narrative. It encourages individuals who are lower income or middle class to join the militaries. But do you know what is more coercive than the idea that joining the military is a pretty cool idea? Conscription is more coercive than that idea. So, what are the reasons that we give to you as to why conscription and heavy nationalism are significantly more likely? What they say on their side of the house is that these things actually go hand in hand. That nationalism is caused by how we treat soldiers as heroes, and that conscription goes along with this. I want to make a number of distinctions here. First, when we talk about the way that this motion actually plays out, things like Remembrance Days are quite unique. Because when we look at Remembrance Day, what we see is that war is actually portrayed as quite tragic, that lives were lost for no reason. But simultaneously, we see the soldiers in those characterizations portrayed as heroes, as individuals who lost their lives for the benefit not of their country, but of protecting other individuals. It's not for some vague sense of national identity that they lose their lives. It is to protect the individuals who live within that state from violence that would come from the other side. That is the critical distinction in terms of the way that portrayal actually works. And then given that, why is conscription likely? What they say on their side of the house is that conscription becomes more likely because of the fact that you are glorifying service. But our question is this: if glorifying service works so well, then why does conscription occur in the first place? A number of reasons as to why these things are diametrically opposed. Because the way that serving in the military is glorified is about the choice to serve in the military. It is about the fact that your brave American servicemen have voluntarily gone to the military and offered to risk their lives for the benefit of that country. It is not the mere fact that you exist in the military, but the active choices that you take into those roles. Why is that critically important in the debate? Because in a circumstance in which you have conscription, glorification of the military is actually low, or glorification of soldiers. What is high is the glorification of the military. And this is what I want to make a distinction in this round. Side proposition treats this debate like this is a round about glorifying the military. That's why you get more interventions. That's why military leaders are elevated. But this was a debate about glorifying soldiers and serving in the military, which is a critical distinction for their side of the house, not right now. Because the implication then is that if you glorify the military, then conscription is perfectly allowed. But when you glorify soldiers, you actually care about not having conscription because that's a violation of the choices of individuals and because it is not necessary if our narrative works as we told you down the bench and as their case necessarily concedes to. No, thank you. The important material that we get out of our side of the house goes woefully unresponded to in second prof. We explain that war is brutal, and that if there aren't rules to war, it is horrible for society. The Geneva Convention arose out of a need to provide dignity to soldiers, out of a view that soldiers have an inherent dignity that stems from the fact that they are heroic, that they are serving their nation. Notice that, even though it is true that Prop might come back and say, no, this is about the fact that they're human beings. That did not exist until the 1930s. The reason why this happened so late is that these narratives are essential. The narrative that you are a hero emerges out of World War I, for example. Now, these narratives are so critically important here because of the fact that we actually get a codification of how soldiers ought to act. That institutions like the US military, for example, have so deeply embedded into their fabric the idea of honor, the idea that soldiers act with a certain dignity and act as heroes. Now, we can debate of whether that has necessarily been true over history, but the point is that the counterfactual is significantly worse. That although militaries are prone to abuse, this is a bulwark against nationalism and a bulwark against conscription that we provide to on our side of the house. It is a strong ideology that prevents bleeding into those worst things that could happen on side proposition. What is the effect on society and on war?
Information?
Sure.
Eritrea doesn't glorify Ethiopian soldiers. Why won't the response just be getting more and more aggressive against soldiers of other nations if you feel like your soldiers have been hurt?
Because you already hate the soldiers of other nations. It's really, really hard if you're in a war to say, oh, we're going to hate the soldiers more when you're killing them on the battlefield. That is a ridiculous premise coming out of Team India. Okay, what is the effect on society and war? What they say is that you cause nationalism and you cause political leaders that come from the military. What do we say in response? First of all, we treat them as heroes in war, not as heroes in politics. This is a critical distinction, because the emanation of heroism that comes is that you've chosen to fight for your country and made the sacrifice. While this might bleed into political life, for example, this is a non-comparative argument, because those individuals will be likely to stem into political service on either side of this debate. It doesn't ameliorate them that they served in the military any more than it would without this narrative, just because of the fact that they protected your country. You're likely to be able to take advantage of those ideologies in either side of this debate. What does Angela give to you on this that does not go responded to? What she says is that the effect on society here is massive, that it is necessary to glorify these individuals as heroes if you ever want a prospect of integration into society. So what we successfully deal with in refutation is the idea that coercion matters in this round, because we prove to you that on the counterfactual that conscription and nationalism make war significantly more brutal, that the rules go out the window, conscription becomes likely, and we are unable to capitalize on narratives that serve as a bulwark against worse advances by the military. No thank you. Moving into my third argument about why this glorification is necessary for the lives of soldiers. A number of premises to this argument. First, as every team in this debate presumably understands, serving in war is brutal. Many soldiers come back from war with post-traumatic stress disorder, for example. There's an obligation, obviously, as both sides concede, from the state to compensate these individuals in some way. What is the question then? In the case of Vietnam, for example, this was seen as a prolonged war of attrition in the jungle by the US public. But political support for veterans after the war lagged. Here is why. Because conscription was used in the case of the Vietnam War. Because those soldiers were not glorified in the same way that soldiers in World War I and World War II were. These soldiers were seen as commodities and expendable because of the conscription that existed. And because they were never glorified, the amount of political capital to spend on veteran services, the amount of political capital needed to reintegrate these people into society, give them the benefits of healthcare and of veteran services, was gone. Because that glorification never existed with conscription in that case. And then furthermore, this bleeds into the fact that we actually get more war crimes and awful accountability on their side of the house. Why? Because soldiers serve multiple tours of duty. When you're plagued by flashbacks, post-traumatic stress disorder, that was when it becomes significantly more likely that on the battlefield you make the wrong decision in the split second and you disobey codes of honor that cease to exist for soldiers on their side of the house. But furthermore, we provide solace to families in the case of death. If you just respect soldiers as you would a doctor, for example, that provides little solace to families when they return. But when society actively glorifies these individuals, that actually means that not only are individuals incentivized, so this helps us with our mechanism as to why conscription is unlikely, but provides solace to society and families in the loss. What we recognize in this debate is that no matter what anyone in this room says, war is going to continue to happen. Second prop concedes this. So the question in the round is how you would like war to arrive. Would you like people to join the military of their own avail when they act in ways that are accountable because codes of honor need to be upheld, when Geneva Convention exists, when we're able to hold soldiers accountable? Or would you prefer a world in which it becomes immensely likely that out of necessity, militaries have to conscript, that they have to hype up racist attitudes about the other side even more than Prot suggests, and hype up hyper-nationalism in order for this to succeed? The world that we live in is plausible. We recognize that glorification is a necessity to avoid atrocities. We're so proud to oppose.